What you see before you is Sony Interactive Entertainment's first major project after its establishment in 1994. As the flagship title for the launch of the PlayStation 1 in Japan, MotorToon Grand Prix was meant to compete against Nintendo's Super Mario Kart. Boasting 3D visuals with tens of thousands of polygons, MotorToon Grand Prix featured unique vehicles created by professional character artists from Japan. It had physics-based drifting and even included a split-screen multiplayer mode. Compared to the Mario Kart of the 16-bit era, Sony clearly appeared to have the racing game advantage. Unfortunately, this advantage was short-lived. Two iterations of MotorToon Grand Prix released on PS1 before Nintendo launched Mario Kart 64. That became one of the best-selling games on Nintendo 64. Meanwhile, back on PlayStation, Namco's Ridge Rider series had become wildly popular, with 3 games released on Sony's console in as many years. These racing giants, Mario Kart 64 and Ridge Racer, quickly established a firm grasp on the racing market. Mario Kart owned the more casual kart racing audience, while Ridge Racer took care of those looking for a slightly more realistic style. Sony's MotorToon Grand Prix got driven off the track. This defeat wasn't the end of Sony's racing ambitions, though. MotorToon Grand Prix underwent a groundbreaking transformation and emerged as what would become the most famous racing series on the PlayStation, Gran Turismo. Let's delve deeper into the fascinating history behind Sony's iconic Gran Turismo series.
TapTap.
In June 1991, Sony experienced a betrayal at the hands of Nintendo, who abandoned their planned partnership on an eternal project. The so-called Nintendo PlayStation was originally intended as a new version of the Super NES that would include a CD drive. But Nintendo decided it wasn't interested in working with Sony after all. In the anger and chaos that followed, Sony's PlayStation project found itself on the verge of cancellation. Sony engineer Ken Kutaragi, the leader of the PlayStation effort, pushed hard for the technology company to keep pursuing a video game console. To prevent interference from the corporation's senior executives, the PlayStation development team decided to move the project's R&D department from Sony headquarters to its subsidiary, Sony Music. Shortly after the move, the development team made an unexpected discovery. During his work on PlayStation, business planner Shohei Yoshida got acquainted with a talented young producer from Sony Music's tiny video game team. The producer's job was to outsource simple games, but he had a deep understanding of 3D graphics technology and a wealth of game design knowledge. Shohei found himself seeking out this young producer's advice when planning new games. He even listened to his unique insights when designing the PlayStation controller. Before long, Yoshida decided he had to recruit this employee to the PlayStation development team properly. That producer's name was Kazunori Yamauchi, or as he would eventually become known by Gran Turismo fans, Kaz. Yamauchi did more than just lend a helping hand to Yoshida. He saw something in PlayStation from the moment he laid eyes on it, a dream he had been pursuing for years. Since kindergarten, Yamauchi had been an automobile enthusiast, able to name any car brand and model that passed by on the road. At the age of 24, he took out a 5-year loan to buy his dream car, a Nissan Skyline GTR. Yeah, the same one driven by Takashi Nakazato in Initial D. Sadly, Yamauchi didn't even get the chance to insure his new GTR before it had to be written off. Just 6 months after he bought the car, Yamauchi crashed it while driving over 120 miles per hour. It's a miracle he survived the crash, but to add insult to injury, he still had to keep paying off that loan. Despite such a devastating experience, Yamauchi never lost his love for cars, and it was still this love that drove his desire to create a virtual driving simulator. That idea seemed too radical for Sony executives at the time, so he compromised and proposed a more broadly appealing, family-friendly racing game, MotorToon Grand Prix. On the surface, MotorToon Grand Prix looked as cartoony as Mario Kart, but it employed extremely precise physics calculations under the hood. The suspension, the handling, and the way vehicles turned were all quite realistic for that time. Why so much attention to realism in a colorful kart racer? The truth was that while developing MotorToon Grand Prix, Yamauchi was already secretly planning another game, Gran Turismo. In the beginning, Yamauchi had a team of just 5 people working on Gran Turismo. This small group was called Poly's Entertainment at the time, but would later adopt the name they carry to this day, Polyphony Digital. The team working on Gran Turismo had to work overtime developing MotorTune Grand Prix publicly while working on Gran Turismo privately. To meet deadlines, some members of the team would sleep under their desks. Yamauchi himself claims he only went home 4 days for each year that he was working on the game. While it may not have been terribly healthy, this dedication yielded astonishing results. When Gran Turismo was released in 1997, it featured an unprecedented level of physics simulation for a racing game. The track's surface, outer curbs, and tilting angles all had completely different physical feedback. Yamauchi even had his team use more challenging and technically lower-level assembly code to compensate for the PS1's performance limitations. In Yamauchi's mind, Gran Turismo wasn't just about racing. It was about experiencing the joy of driving. With that in mind, he included a license test mode in Gran Turismo, and he even mastered all the game's driving techniques himself during the development process. As for the reason why Yamauchi made the game as realistic as he did, this was because he believed driving a car in real life was easier than driving one in a video game. He thought if the game's simulation was realistic enough, players would feel that smoothness of driving a real car. For myself, driving a real car is not supposed to be hard. It's often easier than driving inside a simulator, said Yamauchi. It wasn't just the physics that were impressive in Gran Turismo. Its visuals were also stunning. According to Shuei Yoshida, he once entered the office and saw Yamauchi and other developers tinkering with something in the corner. When they called him over, he saw a car rotating on the game's menu. The light reflected off the car's surface in a shockingly realistic way. Yoshida had never seen anything like it in his life and says he was blown away by Gran Turismo's potential. These achievements soon reached the ears of Sony's top executives, and the game was officially approved for development. By the 5th year of Gran Turismo's development, the team of 5 developers had expanded to around 20 people. Gran Turismo was released in Japan in December 23, 1997. The game included 140 cars and 11 tracks. Despite his passion for the project, Yamauchi initially predicted that Gran Turismo sales wouldn't be very impressive. At that time, virtually every popular racing game focused on more exhilarating arcade racing experience. No one expected a simulation racing game like Gran Turismo to be a hit. On Gran Turismo's launch day, Yamauchi and other members of the development team visited several game stores. In each one, there were lines of gamers waiting to purchase Gran Turismo. In its first month, it sold over 1 million copies. Within a year, it had sold 2 million copies in Japan alone. By the middle of 1999, with Gran Turismo now available worldwide, its sales skyrocketed to a staggering 6 million units. To this day, Gran Turismo remains the best-selling game on PS1, surpassing Final Fantasy VII by nearly 1 million copies. Thanks to the resounding success of Gran Turismo, Yamauchi and crew quickly began work on a sequel. Gran Turismo 2 didn't make any major changes to the formula introduced in the first game. Instead, it focused on significantly expanding the content that was offered. The number of cars increased 5-fold with almost 650 vehicles included. And the tracks also expanded to over double the first game with 27 tracks in total. Gran Turismo 2 went on to sell over 9 million copies, and it received a Metacritic score of 93 based on the average of reviews from across major media outlets. Yamauchi's worry that Gran Turismo would be nothing more than a niche title was misplaced. Gran Turismo 1 and 2 proved that players wanted realistic racing simulations. In the years following the release of the first 2 Gran Turismo games, racing sims popped up all over. Games like Mobile 1 Rally Championship, NASCAR Racing 3, and F355 Challenge all arrived with favorable reviews and solid sales. For Yamauchi though, his dream for simulation racing games was about more than just making the driving feel realistic. He wanted players to experience the joy of driving itself. Some of Yamauchi's goals fell out of reach on the PS1, but with the significant technology improvements offered by the PlayStation 2 when it arrived in 2000, he was ready to try once more with Gran Turismo 3. Although the first 2 Gran Turismo games had hints of car culture, Gran Turismo 3 truly embodied the car fanatic lifestyle that Yamauchi had grown up with. It also continued the series' trend of being a visual showcase. The vehicles not only reflected light realistically, but those reflections now shifted more accurately based on whether the car was under shade or in direct sunlight, or even the color of the paint on the vehicle. The physics simulation was also buffed up, with different weather conditions such as mud, rain, and dirt tracks, each of which affected how a car handled. While the number of cars was reduced from 650 to 180, it took Polyphony Digital a full day to model and fine-tune each car in Gran Turismo 3. Yamauchi wanted players to feel how unique each car was. He wanted purchasing a car in the game to feel like receiving a gift. Shopping for cars in Gran Turismo 3 was reimagined, with a menu that felt like flipping through a car magazine. Compared to the cold, standard user interface of its predecessors, this presentation was much more exciting. Gran Turismo 3 broke the traditions of racing games in many ways. For instance, more development resources than usual were devoted to the game's replay function, allowing players to enjoy watching their completed race from various professional camera angles. Yamauchi also obtained extensive licensing beyond what had been seen in any racing game previously. Rally and F1 cars made appearances for the first time. The game even featured the Mitsubishi Lancer Evolution 7 before the car's real-world release. With Gran Turismo 3, Yamauchi once again committed to showcasing his artistry and passion for driving as much as possible. As with previous entries in the series, overtime was the norm for him. Yamauchi dedicated paid time off yet again. Within the first 3 days of Gran Turismo 3 hitting the shelves in 2001, it sold 1 million copies. Within 2 years, that number shot up to a whopping 11 million. And as of 2008, it had sold nearly 15 million copies, making Gran Turismo 3 the best-selling game in the series. Yamauchi must have known that working overtime indefinitely wasn't sustainable. He set up a small rest area within Polyphony Digital's office. He had everything: gaming consoles, a library, gym equipment, and even small bicycles for employees to ride around to help elevate that stress of sitting for long hours. Yamauchi wanted his team of developers to be happy and healthy as they worked on their next massive project, Gran Turismo 4. Gran Turismo 4 may not have sold as much as 3, but it was still a big leap forward in gameplay, as well as yet another impressive showcase for awe-inspiring graphics. Gran Turismo 4 made full use of the PlayStation 2's capabilities to recreate the real world in the game, from street views to tracks to vehicle reflections to driver animations. Yamauchi conducted in-depth field research to help ensure that every detail was right. He enlisted professional drivers to provide data on vehicle tuning rates and tire grip. He even increased the cost of car modeling and sound recording. From door handles to steering wheels, Gran Turismo 4 replicated real-world cars almost perfectly. The in-game tracks were nearly identical to their real-world counterparts. And all this content was able to run smoothly on the PlayStation 2 at 1080i, 60 frames per second, while most games on PS2 at the time were still stuck at 480p resolution. Content-wise, Gran Turismo 4 surpassed its predecessors when it comes to sheer numbers. With over 700 cars and 51 tracks, the game was like a racing museum. It also introduced more realistic elements such as repair stations and tire warming before races. Gran Turismo 4 built on the series' legacy of hardcore racing sim credentials, but it still had no trouble appealing to the average racing fan. Part of the reason for Gran Turismo 4's broad appeal was its smart structure. You could treat it as a serious driving simulation and challenge yourself to license tests. Or you could just collect cars and enjoy the thrill of speeding around corners like a torpedo. Between the variety of content, the top-tier graphics, and the finely tuned simulation elements, it's no wonder that many fans consider Gran Turismo 4 to be nearly perfect and one of the best entries in the franchise. By the time Gran Turismo 4 launched in 2004, the series had pretty much completed its process of transformation in terms of gameplay. Yamauchi showed no signs of slowing down though. As hardware capabilities improved, the cost of game development skyrocketed. Given Yamauchi's perfectionism, creating a single car model for Gran Turismo 5 on the PlayStation 3 took anywhere from 3 to 6 months. With those kinds of development timelines, the Gran Turismo series couldn't possibly keep up with Sony's demand for a new installment every 2 to 3 years. As a last resort, Yamauchi released an expanded demo of Gran Turismo 5 as a prologue, a trick he'd also used from Gran Turismo 4. Unlike last time though, it took a full 3 years of development between the release of Gran Turismo 5 Prologue in December 2007 to the full Gran Turismo 5 in November 2010. Maybe it was worth the wait though. The complete version of Gran Turismo 5 boasted over 1,000 cars and 81 tracks, and it introduced physical damage modeling for the first time in the series. Fundamentally, it wasn't all that different from its predecessors. But what mattered more to Yamauchi and the team was that Gran Turismo strengthened its bond with the real-life racing world. For example, Citroën decided to unveil its car concept, the Citroën GT, for the first time in Gran Turismo 5. Red Bull Racing also collaborated on the project. Adrian Newey, the chief technical officer of the Red Bull Racing team, designed the ultimate virtual race car, the Red Bull X 2010. This fictional car was featured in the game with the concept that it would be the fastest racing car on land, one that throws aside all rules and regulations. Gran Turismo 5 players were also able to learn from real-world racing legends in the game. French rally driver Sébastien Loeb and German F1 champion Sebastian Vettel both appeared to give players advice on their unique styles of racing. On paper, many of Gran Turismo 5's additions seemed relatively minor, like they wouldn't make a huge impact for the average gamer. But in Yamauchi's pursuit in the perfect racing simulation, content like this was vital to the series' continued improvement. Gran Turismo was all about broadening the horizons of racing games and conveying the allure of real-life driving. Many subsequent racing games would be inspired to learn this lesson. With Gran Turismo 6, Polyphony Digital created a new program called Vision Gran Turismo, wherein various manufacturers could help create unique concepts of cars to be featured in the series moving forward. Due to how seriously the series took cars and the art of driving, Gran Turismo 6 became the first game to obtain FIA certification from the International Automobile Federation, an event that Yamauchi called the biggest accolade we have ever received. The result of all the love and attention to detail poured into Gran Turismo 6 was a truly massive racing game wherein players could feel a sense of intense satisfaction from success. Gran Turismo 6 launched in 2013 with over 1,200 cars and 100 tracks. Regardless of which vehicle you used, when you drove the highest simulation settings, accomplished all the license requirements, and completed the many races available, it was enough to make you feel like you could give real-world racing a shot. In fact, by the time Gran Turismo Sport arrived on PlayStation 4 in 2017, Yamauchi and the FIA were planning for players to be able to earn a real racing license within the game. This idea never quite came to fruition, but even the fact that they were planning it shows how incredibly seriously Gran Turismo is taken in the racing world these days. For players who only recently discovered the series, Gran Turismo may not hit with the same charm that it once did. Gran Turismo Sport launched after a 4-year wait with fewer cars than any game in the series since GT3, and without a traditional single-player career mode. Meanwhile, other racing game options like Codemasters Dirt and Microsoft Forza's series had offered a greater number of vehicle options and more variety in gameplay. The perception of Gran Turismo as niche might seem strange, given that the series averages over 10 million in sales for each entry, but it's not entirely without merit. With advancements in hardware, the exquisite visuals of GT are no longer impossible for other studios to achieve. Racing games with more vibrant colors, a stronger sense of speed, and more flamboyant style can deliver graphics that are just as good as what Gran Turismo has been offering for generations now. Polyphony Digital also faces more competition in the realm of virtual car physics. Games like Project Cars have pushed further in the direction of realistic physics simulation. Even the extreme realism of a game like Assetto Corsa hasn't stopped it from selling 12 million copies and stealing some of the limelight away from Gran Turismo. What kind of racing game do players really want? Different developers have provided their answers, and players have voted on their preferences with their wallets. From the player's perspective, more competition in the racing game market affords them a richer variety of experiences to choose from, and this isn't a bad thing at all. However, for Yamauchi, the competition has simply provided more reasons to stick with his long-standing beliefs. Yamauchi didn't shy away from this topic during the development of Gran Turismo 7. Speaking to IGN in 2021, Yamauchi said, "25 years ago, the world was very different. There were lots of different car media out there, and kids would come into contact with cars all the time and naturally become car fans. Gran Turismo was born in that environment. But when you look at the world now, all the different opportunities for new enthusiasts of cars to be born have sort of been lost over the years. I wouldn't say GT is the only one, but GT is definitely one of the last mediums where a new car fan can be born." Fueled by this belief, 2022's Gran Turismo 7 transformed the traditional single-player career mode with the inclusion of an automotive cafe. As you complete solo tasks, the game narrates the history and legends behind different vehicles, giving younger fans and grizzled veterans alike a chance to learn all about the cars they love. For as much as Gran Turismo has changed over 25 years, Yamauchi's perfectionism remains the essence of the series. Modern gamers may not be charmed by its initially reserved style. But Gran Turismo has earned its place in racing game history with an unmatched attention to detail, with ever-evolving driving challenges, and even with the process of breaking through basic races with a used car and unlocking better vehicles one by one. The Gran Turismo series doesn't represent just racing, driving simulation, or automotive culture. Rather, it's a culmination of all of these elements rolled into an obsessively precise virtual automotive ecosystem. If you give Gran Turismo a chance and truly immerse yourself in it, you'll almost certainly find enjoyment in the act and art of driving. Future entries in the franchise will almost certainly require adjustments and compromises to stay competitive, but hopefully Yamauchi and the developers at Polyphony Digital can take some pride in just how far they've come since their humble start working on MotorTune Grand Prix. And hopefully they're not sleeping under their desk while working on Gran Turismo 8.